There are moments when something starts happening within and around you, and no one seems able to grasp it. Coincidences so precise they defy reason, dreams that feel more real than the day, sensations that announce what hasn't happened yet. You try to explain it, but words feel small in the face of the inexplicable. That's the point where many think they're losing their minds. But Jung said, the encounter with the unconscious is always unsettling, because it contains everything we have forgotten we are. Maybe what you're living isn't confusion, but the awakening of an ancient perception, the soul's secret language communicating through the world. Numbers repeat, people show up at the exact moment, dreams bring answers, and the mind, accustomed to control, collapses before a greater intelligence that doesn't obey logic, but synchronicity. Jung called this unus mundus, the field where everything is connected, the place where chance reveals meaning, where life stops being a collection of random events and becomes a sacred dialogue between the self and the infinite. If this is happening to you, understand. It's not a mistake, it's a calling. Reality isn't betraying you, it's initiating you. There's an invisible line that connects all things, and you've begun to perceive it. In the next few minutes, we'll cross 5 experiences that reveal themselves only to those who awaken spiritually. Phenomena that transform how you dream, feel, love, and exist. And perhaps by recognizing them, you'll realize you're not going crazy. You're beginning to become whole. Chapter 1. Synchronicity, the secret language of the unus mundus. Something mysterious begins to happen when consciousness awakens. The universe seems to find a voice. Coincidences become so specific, they stop being coincidences. A name that surfaces over and over. A number that insists on appearing. A book that falls open to the exact page where a response rests that you didn't yet know you were seeking. Carl Jung called this synchronicity a causal connecting principle, when external events and internal states line up meaningfully without any cause and effect relationship. But for Jung, it wasn't magic or superstition. It was the sign that the individual unconscious was starting to dialogue with the collective unconscious, revealing the unity that has always existed behind all forms. The unus mundus, the one world. When you start to notice this pattern, it's like tuning into a frequency that was always there, but the ordinary mind couldn't pick up. Reality becomes a symbolic mirror of what's happening inside you. Life begins to answer you, not with words, but with symbols. And the more aligned you are with your inner truth, the more the universe seems to organize itself around that vibration. But there's a paradox. Synchronicities cease when the ego tries to control them. When you try to force signs, the silence returns. Because the universe doesn't speak to the ego, it speaks to the self. Synchronicity isn't a fortune-telling tool, it's a mirror of authenticity. It only happens when there's surrender, not when there's pursuit. Jung said that the privilege of consciousness is also its burden. As you perceive the invisible threads that weave reality, you become simultaneously enchanted and isolated. How do you explain to someone that the universe has begun to answer you? That a song, a cloud, a number can be direct, personal, non-transferable messages? The rational mind, shaped by the paradigm of chance, will laugh at you, but the soul knows. It recognizes the subtle touch of synchronicity, like someone rediscovering a forgotten language. A simple practice can help expand this perception. For 3 days, write down every meaningful coincidence, every symbolic repetition that stirs something in you. Don't try to explain them, just notice what you feel. Then, in silence, ask yourself, what does this sequence want to remind me about who I am right now? You'll notice that synchronicities aren't predictions, they're mirrors, and each one reveals a fragment of the dialogue between your consciousness and the intelligence of the whole. At its core, synchronicity is the first language of the awakened soul. It's the invitation to let go of control and listen again, because when the universe speaks, it doesn't want to prove anything to you. It only wants to remind you that you are part of it. Chapter 2. The Transcendent Function. Becoming a living paradox. There's a moment on the path of awakening when everything seems to split apart. The mind no longer understands what the heart feels. Love and pain stop being opposites. What was once clear and predictable dissolves into a territory where everything is true and contradictory at the same time. Jung called this process the transcendent function, the awakened psyche's ability to hold opposites without destroying itself. It's the point at which human consciousness begins to mirror the structure of the universe itself, dual yet indivisible. The soul then starts to live in two worlds, one that suffers and another that understands, one that fears and another that observes fear with love. Most people try to escape the tension between contradictions. They want to be only light or only reason or only faith. But the awakened one learns that real transformation doesn't lie in picking a side, but in enduring the interval between them. Jung said the transcendent function is the living bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It doesn't erase the poles. It creates a third element, a synthesis that transcends both. And that third force is always creative. From it are born leaps of consciousness, deep healings, ideas that don't come from thought but from silence. When the transcendent function awakens, you begin to live impossible paradoxes. You can feel sadness and gratitude at the same time. You feel free and yet deeply responsible. You see beauty even in what hurts. From the outside, it may look like confusion. From the inside, it's expansion. You become vast enough to hold the conflict, and the conflict stops holding you. One of Jung's patients described it like this: "My mind grew large enough to house what once tore me apart. Now I no longer have to choose between yes and no. I can rest in the middle." That's the essence of the transcendent function. Resting in the middle. It's there that the ego yields and the self begins to create. Fear gives way to perception. And what used to be duality turns into dance. To approach this experience, try something simple. When an inner conflict arises, don't rush to decide. Write in 2 columns the 2 truths contending within you. Then read both in silence until you feel a third presence emerge, something that denies neither but holds both. That's the balance point Jung called living creation. Being a living paradox is the destiny of every awakened soul, because the truest light doesn't come from choosing light over dark, but from remembering that sunrise is made of both. Chapter 3. Dreams that leave marks on the body. Every awakened soul begins to dream differently. Dreams stop being noise from a sleeping mind and become messages from the self, letters sent from a place where time doesn't exist. They arrive loaded with a strange lucidity, as if consciousness crossed the veil between worlds and stayed awake inside the night itself. Jung said that the dream is the small hidden door to the deepest and most intimate sanctuary of the soul. Through that door, the unconscious speaks in a language not made of logic, but of symbols, and every symbol is an emotion dressed as an image. The awakened notice that their dreams change in texture. They're no longer disconnected fragments, but whole experiences that leave physical traces, a feeling of lightness upon waking, a lingering shiver, a tear that belongs to nothing visible. These are the dreams that leave marks on the body, because the body is the unconscious's first altar. Some wake remembering precise words, teachings, warnings. Others feel they've crossed an initiation, dying and being reborn in a single night. These are the big dreams, the ones you don't interpret but revere. They don't ask for analysis, they ask for silence. Because in them there is no metaphor, there is presence. A man told Jung he dreamed he stood before a golden tree that said to him, "Everything you seek lies within your roots." Years later, that same man became a gardener and wrote a book about the symbolic life of plants. The dream had germinated in him, literally. That's how self-dreams are. They don't pass, they plant. Many of these dreams anticipate events, not as fortune-telling, but as the recollection of something the soul already knows. Linear time dissolves, and the dreamer touches the field where past and future intertwine. When this happens, the mind fears, but the heart recognizes. Because the unconscious doesn't foresee, it remembers. There's an even rarer kind of dream, the sacred dream. In it, you meet luminous figures who teach by presence, not words. They are living archetypes, the wise old man, the great mother, the hero, the divine child, symbols of the individuation process that take form to guide the way. Upon waking, you know something has changed forever, even if you can't name it. If you want to draw closer to this dimension, start recording your dreams for 7 days. Don't try to interpret them, just describe the sensations they leave. Then ask, what does this dream want to remind me about myself? Over time, you'll notice that dreams are bridges between you and that which created you, because the unconscious doesn't sleep. It only waits for you to become lucid enough to listen while you dream. Chapter 4, Ego-Self Axis. When the I stops being the CEO, there's a moment in the journey when the I begins to come undone, not in destruction but in revelation. What you called I discovers it isn't the center of the universe, but a small vertex of a far greater consciousness. Jung called this the reorganization of the ego-self axis, the reorientation of the personality toward its deepest core, where the psyche's creative principle, the self, dwells. For much of life, the ego believes it's the director of the story. It plans, decides, controls, fears. But spiritual awakening is the moment when this director realizes the script isn't his. The self is the one that leads, and the ego is just the actor giving shape to the role. Jung wrote, "The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego, and yet it's the most liberating defeat there is. When this transition begins, you start to observe yourself in the third person. You're in a conversation and, at the same time, you're the silent observer watching the scene. It isn't dissociation, but expanded presence. You notice the impulse to react, but choose not to. You watch fear arise, but recognize it as part of a larger theater. It's like living with two cameras, filming the same life, one human and one divine. At first, this is disconcerting. The ego tries to regain control, sometimes dressed up as spirituality. It says, I'm enlightened, I'm beyond. But the self responds with irony, subtle humiliations, forgetfulness, stumbles, small disasters that return you to humility. Jung called this psychic compensation, the universe reminding the ego it is servant, not sovereign. And when this surrender happens, a new inner order is born. The ego stops commanding and starts serving the whole. The mind becomes an instrument, not a prison. You act in the world, but no longer fully identify with what you do. You feel simultaneously someone and no one, limited and infinite, laughing at your own importance and loving your own smallness. This is true freedom, being able to participate in life without getting lost in it. Being on the stage while knowing you're part of the cosmic theater. A simple practice helps align the ego with the self. In moments of conflict, close your eyes and breathe 3 times. Ask yourself, who in me is reacting right now? The wounded me or the conscious me? The answer will come in silence, and that silence is the self. When the ego-self axis stabilizes, life changes in texture. The world no longer revolves around you. You revolve around the whole. And in that gentle rotation, you discover that consciousness isn't yours. You belong to it. Chapter 5. Living Mythically, the archetype behind the scene. There comes a moment when life stops feeling like chance and starts sounding like a myth being told through you. Everyday events, loss, love, conflict, illness, begin to carry a symbolic dimension. You realize you're not just living a personal story, but enacting universal patterns that have always existed in the collective unconscious. Jung called this living mythically. Living mythically isn't escaping reality, but recognizing it as the stage of archetypal forces much greater than the ego. Your mother suddenly stops being just a difficult woman. She becomes the manifestation of the Great Mother, with her nurturing sweetness and her devouring shadow. Losing your job isn't just a failure, it's the hero's calling, the crossing through the dark night that prepares a rebirth. A romantic relationship isn't just desire and coexistence. It's the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage between the masculine and the feminine within you. When this perception settles in, the everyday becomes ritual. Every pain reveals itself as initiation. Every encounter, a mirror of an eternal principle, and the question, why is this happening to me, becomes, which archetype is moving through me right now? Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who we truly are, and who we are includes the cosmic forces that move through us. Living mythically is allowing the self to act through the human form, making life a symbolic act of consciousness. But this revelation also brings a sacred weight. Once you perceive you are an instrument of universal patterns, you can no longer live unconsciously. Every gesture takes on importance. Every choice resounds in the world's invisible fabric. You become at once the actor and the role, the human and the myth. This vision brings compassion. You begin to see others not as enemies or victims, but as personifications of archetypes on stage. The friend who betrays may be under the sway of the trickster, the authoritarian politician possessed by the tyrant, the innocent child, a channel of the purity the world forgot. No one is just a person. We're all transient expressions of the collective unconscious trying to become conscious. To integrate this perception, try something simple. Think of a recent conflict. Ask yourself, which archetypal force was acting behind this? Name it. Watch it. By recognizing the myth, you stop being dragged by it. Once conscious, the symbol loses the power to possess you and starts to serve you. Living mythically is, therefore, dancing between the human and the eternal. It's understanding that your biography is just the particular way the cosmos chose to tell a universal story. Chapter 6. The Irreversibility of Consciousness and Quiet Service. After consciousness awakens, there's no going back. The world remains the same, but you're no longer the one who perceived it. Old distractions lose their shine, the noise of hurry becomes deafening, and solitude stops being a punishment. It becomes a temple. Jung called this the irreversibility of consciousness, a structural transformation in which the psyche stops orbiting the ego and begins to revolve around the self. You try to fit back into your old version of yourself, but it no longer fits. Shallow conversations become tiresome. Old dreams feel narrow. Awakening isn't just expansion, it's loss. You lose innocence, the comfort of ignorance, the shelter of certainties. And at the same time, something indestructible is born, the clarity of being alive within a larger purpose, even without fully understanding it. At this point, many feel isolated. But isolation is the interval in which the self reorganizes the interior for a new way of serving. Jung believed that every individuation process is also an act of collective service. Each person who awakens increases the amount of consciousness available to humanity. It's as if, by lighting your small flame, you make the darkness less dense for everyone. This is the awakened individual's quiet service, to live lucidly. There's no heroic mission, no preaching, no need to convince anyone. The mere presence of a conscious person alters the field. Your peace becomes an invitation, your gaze a reminder, your silence an invisible prayer. Science calls this coherence. Jung called it mystical participation, the state in which the individual perceives that everything they do, feel, and think reverberates in the whole. That's why responsibility grows. Every thought is a seed, every emotion a frequency shaping the invisible. But this awareness shouldn't generate weight, but reverence, because it isn't about saving the world. It's about being awake in it, living as if every gesture were sacred, breathing as if the air were a prayer, listening to someone as if you were hearing the universe speak through that voice. When Jung said modern man is in search of a soul, he wasn't talking about a romantic ideal, but an evolutionary transition. Humanity awakens one individual at a time, and every soul that awakens, even quietly, upholds the world from within. The irreversibility of consciousness is this: not being able to live on autopilot anymore because you realize life is alive, and what used to be fate becomes dialogue. Conclusion: metamorphosis, not madness. Maybe what you're experiencing feels too strange to explain. Seeing patterns where you once saw chance, sensing invisible presences, dreaming of realities more real than the day, being seized by a lucidity that hurts. But this isn't madness, it's metamorphosis. Jung said that the encounter with the self is an alchemical process. The lead of personality turns into the gold of consciousness. And every alchemy begins with dissolution. You disintegrate to discover what in you can no longer die. You lose certainties, roles, identities, and in the space between what ends and what is born, something sacred awakens, the remembrance that you are part of life itself trying to recognize itself. These experiences, synchronicity, paradoxes, dreams, the relativizing of the ego, mythic consciousness, aren't symptoms of escape, but signs of evolution. You're not moving away from the world, you're beginning to see it from within. What used to be chaos reveals itself as language. What used to be pain becomes initiation. But this path is solitary, and that's why this space exists. Here, among souls that are also awakening, you don't need to explain yourself. You can simply breathe and remember there are others listening to the same silent voice that speaks in you. So if something in this video resonated with your journey, share in the comments which of these experiences you've been living most intensely. Your account may be the confirmation another soul needs to trust their own awakening. And remember, reality isn't driving you insane. It's educating you for wholeness. Trust the crossing, because what is born of the soul is never lost. It's the self, finally, living through you.